What is up? Welcome back to yet another deck profile. Today I have finally gotten around to Virtual World. I've kind of held off of it for a little bit because I wasn't as comfortable with the deck as I was with Drytron and Adamantipator, but I've been playing a lot more of it, and the deck is pretty awesome, and I'm learned it a lot better. So I'm going to make this deck profile here. Yesterday on stream I played the deck for a while. Played, I think it was 17 games. This was the first one that I played with Virtual World, and I only lost a single match. So I went 16-1 on stream, which you can see on my channel. The VOD is saved, and the only loss that I had was just to a complete brick against an opponent. I couldn't draw into any of my names. I kept drawing my level 6s. So yeah, this deck is pretty fire. So let's go into the deck list itself. Here's the deck list I've been running with so far. It's mostly standard. There are just a couple changes that differ from what most people are playing. This is what I have. The Virtual World is a synchro-based archetype that focuses on getting out level 3s and level 6s. Some of them are tuners, some of them are non-tuners. So your Virtual World monsters are going to be either Earth attribute worm type monsters or wind attribute psychic type monsters, and you use those to make a variety of powerful level 6 and 9 synchros, like Virtual World Juju, Stardust Charge, which lets you draw one, Ravenous Crocodile, which also lets you draw one, and Shen Shen, which banishes everything that leaves the field. But the main win condition of this deck, and what makes it one of the strongest, if not the strongest deck in the entire game, is summoning True King of all Calamities, which requires 2+ level 9 monsters. That's pretty easy to do in this deck since it makes level 9 synchros very easily and has the ability to change levels as well. So even if you get level 6s on board, you can change them to a level 9 and then overlay for True King of all Calamities, which is also known as VFD, because that is what is shown on the Japanese card text in the name. It just says VFD. So this card is stupidly powerful. It's banned in both the TCG and the OCG. I'm not sure why they decided to make it legal in Master Duel, but I guess I just wanted to have really powerful decks. So let's talk about why this card is so broken, because it may not be immediately obvious why. But as in fact, it says once per turn, quick effect. You can detach one material from this card and declare one attribute. This turn, all face-up monsters on the field become that attribute. Also, all monsters in your opponent's possession with that attribute cannot activate their effects or attack. It has another effect, but that does not matter for this deck. So this effect basically allows you to lock your opponent out for their entire turn of really doing anything. It's what we call a lingering effect, which means it applies, once the effect resolves, it applies until the end of the turn, regardless of what happens to VFD itself. So if they destroy it with Raigeki or something, it doesn't matter. The effect will still apply for the rest of the turn. So they basically have to negate it like right when you activate it, or else they can't do anything, really. So also the part of the wording on this is that monsters in your opponent's possession, that attribute. So that means that includes monsters in their hand or in their graveyard. So if let's say you call Light and your opponent is playing Drytron, they literally cannot activate their Drytrons at all. They can't activate their Cyber Angels. They can't do any of that. So knowing what attribute your opponent's playing, if you declare the correct one, they can't do anything. But even if you declare the wrong attribute, it also prevents monsters in your opponent's possession from attacking. So as soon as they summon a monster, even if they summon, so let's say you call Water, for example, something that is usually not a good call, but your opponent is playing a light deck. As soon as they summon a monster, it immediately becomes the Water attribute because of the lingering effect. So even if PFD is off the field, the monster will all become Water, and that means they will not be able to activate their effects or attack. So even if you declare the wrong attribute, that's not what your opponent's playing, worst case scenario, they can't even attack you for the rest of the turn. So, or activate any monster effects on the field. This card is extremely oppressive, and there's a good reason why it's banned in both the TCG and the OCG. And like I said, it's also very easy to summon. And even some of the common counter cards to this card are able to be stopped with this deck. So for example, you generally want to activate, well, we'll get into the discussion of when to activate it or what attribute to call later. But let's say you activate it immediately during your opponent's turn. They can chain Forbidden Droplet, for example, and if they discard like a monster or a spell to try to negate your VFD, you can actually chain Virtual World Gate Chuche. So this allows you to destroy your own VFD, and since it's no longer on the field, it can't be negated by Droplet, so the effect still goes through. That's just one of the more unfair things about this deck, is Virtual World Chuche. So yeah, VFD is basically the main boss monster for this deck. I'll talk a little bit about how to use it later on, but let's go into the main deck. Let's first go over the Virtual World monsters. Nian Nian. So this is the only one that doesn't have a hand effect out of these Virtual World monsters. The main ones that you're playing. But it's good to have in the graveyard, because if a level 3 monster is normally special summoned, it can special summon itself, and it becomes a level 3 tuner, but is banished when it leaves the field. However, one unique thing about Nian Nian is that when it's banished, you can target one of your other banished cards and shuffle it into the deck. This is kind of a unique effect because it allows you to recover face-down banished cards. It's one of the very few cards in the game that can actually do that. So if you use Pot of Desires, let's say you banish all of your Lulus somehow, which is very unlucky. You can still recover them by banishing Nian Nian and shuffling one of your face-down banished cards into the deck. Even though your opponent can't see your face-down banished cards, you can, and you can choose which one you're shuffling back. Lulu is the best card in your deck in terms of Virtual World monsters, because it allows you to also search. So you can target one Virtual World card you control, send one Virtual World card of a different type, monster, spell, or trap. So all of these Virtual Worlds share that same first part, and then they each have a second part to their effect. So Lulu, when it's summoned, you can add one Virtual World card of the third type from your deck to your hand. So let's say you target a monster, you can send a spell or trap from your deck to the graveyard, a Virtual World one, and then you can add one of the third type. So if you sent a spell, you can add a trap to your hand. So yeah, so Lulu is very good for searching your deck, and it's usually what your opponent is going to negate if they know your deck. Gigi is a non-tuner, level 3, allows you to recycle Virtual World cards during the end phase of your turn. Lao Lao is a level 6 tuner, which is fairly unique, which allows you to go and do plays like with Zulkin, but on summon it's also a monster reborn for one of your Virtual World monsters. Then you have Lili, which is a double foolish, so you can send one Virtual World card of a different type, and then send one of the third type. So kind of like Lulu, except instead of adding the third type to your hand, you send it to the graveyard. So this can be useful, especially for getting follow-up, getting your Nian Nian in the graveyard, which is nice because it special summons itself. 2/2 is one that most people don't play, actually. It's definitely the worst out of all of the Virtual World cards, but I think it's like okay. I decided to try around, try to play with it. I thought it was fine. It's pretty good for a normal summon, at least. You can normal summon it without tributing, as long as you only control worms or psychics. And then you can also do kind of the same thing as Nian Nian, which is to special summon itself as a tuner, but banish it when it leaves the field. So 2/2s, I think it's decent, but you definitely don't want to play more than one of this. And they all, also one thing to note is that all of these Virtual World monsters, they have a restriction that says you can only special summon level 3 or rank 3 or higher monsters for the rest of the turn. So this is the reason why Virtual World doesn't play any Link monsters, because Link monsters don't have a level or a rank, so you actually can't really use them in this deck. Pot of Desires is kind of a no-brainer in this deck. You're playing pretty much 3 of each of your key cards that you need, so your chances of banishing them are pretty low, and Desires allows you to get card advantage which is great because you're going to have to discard quite a bit in this deck. Kowloon is really good. It allows you to activate a Qinglong or a Chuche from your deck. And since you need to have basically a virtual world card face up to use any of your monster effects, this comes in handy. So you definitely want to have 3 of this. Qinglong is your best searcher probably, by itself at least. You want it in your graveyard generally, because you can banish it from your graveyard, add 1 virtual world monster, any of these, then you have to send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard. It also does have another effect which comes in handy. You can banish 1 virtual world card from your graveyard and then target 1 face-up monster on the field and negate its effects. So it's great for adding problematic cards like, say, Appaloosa, Winda, and some of those. Also, a no-brainer at 3. And you generally are able to dump 2 of them during your first turn at least, which means that you can get your search on your first turn, and then you have a second one in your graveyard for follow-up, which is really good. Emergency Teleport would definitely play 3 of this if we were allowed to, but it's unfortunately semi-limited. It allows you to get your Nian Nian or Lulu out of the deck, which is very useful, obviously. If we had a third one, I'd probably cut the 2/2 and play a third Emergency Teleport. It's also not once per turn, for some reason. Call by the Grave for stopping hand traps. You already know you don't want to get hit with Max C, so you can stop that. Forbidden Droplet. Most people don't actually play this card in Virtual World because you do have to discard quite a bit with these cards. With Qinglong and Xuanwu, they require you to discard, so you don't always want to play this, but I still think it's pretty nice in this deck. Because like worst case scenario, you can send cards from your field if needed. Plus going second, like, you're gonna have to out certain cards, like Herald of Ultimateness. You're gonna have no way of doing that otherwise, really. Chuche is one of the key playmakers in this deck. You always try to end on this in your turn 1 if you can. It allows you to destroy a face-up card on the field while simultaneously shuffling 2 of your virtual world, your banished virtual world cards back into the deck. So it's both disruption and recursion in the same card. And then it has a unique effect while it's in the graveyard. To target 1 virtual world monster you control, increase or decrease its level/rank by 3. And this is obviously useful for helping to get you to VFD and or any other of your level 9 synchros, for example. Xuanwu. This one, you typically don't use it for the battle phase effect. You can change 1 face-up monster on the field or you can change its battle position, but that's not really that great. But during your main phase, you can banish it and then reborn 1 of your virtual world monsters, and then send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard. So that one comes in handy, definitely. So I want to play. You definitely want to have 1 of these, I would say, in your deck. Then your other hand traps, you got Triple Maxi, of course, best card in the game, and Triple Ash. I haven't had this come up for me yet, but it is a level 3 tuner, so if you gotta normal summon it, sometimes that could come up. I could see that. Extra deck, Stardust Charge Warrior. Gonna make this about, I don't know, 20 to 30% of the time in your combos to draw 1 card. Card advantage is fairly important in this deck since you are discarding, like I said. So Stardust Charge Warrior being a 6 helps. Coral Dragon is basically the same thing, but like the inverse. It's a tuner, and it doesn't draw you a card when it's summoned, but when it's sent to the graveyard, it lets you draw a card. And it can also destroy an opponent's card, which comes in handy. Juju is somewhat difficult to out because it has the ability to not be destroyed by battle or card effects while you have 2 or more monsters in your graveyard with the same original type and attribute but different names, which you usually do. It's also a level 6 virtual world monster, which means since it's a virtual world card, you can target it with each of your monster effects to special summon them. So it comes in handy. And it also has the ability to send 1 of your opponent's cards to the graveyard, which is obviously a good version of spot removal, and it doesn't destroy, it sends, which is pretty nice to get around indestructible monsters. Crystal Wing and Zulkin, these 2 go together. You either play both of them or neither. So Zolkin you're going to summon with by sending a level 6 tuner and a level 6 non-tuner from your field to the graveyard. But it's a really weird monster. It doesn't show like a level on it. It's always treated as level 12, and it's not really a synchro summon the way you special summon it, but I mean you kind of get what it's trying to do. Then you gotta set a spell or trap to activate its effect. So it'll special summon a power tool synchro monster or one level 7 or 8 dragon synchro monster. And so that is where Crystal Wing comes in, which is a very powerful monster negate and can also gain attack and do massive amounts of damage. So this is good for playing around Nibiru, Gamma, other cards that can potentially disrupt you either during your turn or your opponent's. So you either want to play both or neither, because they go together. Unfortunately, they are both ultra rares, so that kind of jacks up the price of the deck a little bit. Cloud Castle is pretty much essential in this deck. There are quite a few lines that involve where it's the only way to get to VFD. Since it can reborn any level 9 monster and it is itself a level 9, then obviously you just overlay into VFD. But typically you're going to use this with Shen Shen. You're going to decrease its level with Chuche to level 6. And then you synchro with one of your level 3 tuners into Cloud Castle. Then use Cloud Castle to reborn your Shen Shen. And there you go. You got 2 level 9s on board. And then VFD. And you win the duel. Vermilion Dragon Mech, this comes up sometimes. It's not immediately clear why this card is played, but there are going to be lines where it's your only way of getting to your full combo. You kind of have to destroy itself, which is kind of weird. Obviously, if you can destroy your opponent's cards, you can do that too, but typically you're going to banish Lulu, target itself, destroy it, then use its effect to add one of your banished tuners to your hand, which is Lulu. Sometimes this is the only way to start your play. So I do think it's important to have this in the deck. Krako Dragon is pretty cool. Also, a good generic level 9 that lets you draw a card. Card advantage is great, so should definitely be playing this guy. Shen Shen, obviously, has the ability when any card is sent from the field to the graveyard is banished instead. So that can be difficult for your opponent to deal with if they're playing a deck like Eldritch and they want their trap cards to go to the graveyard. So it's going to be a pain if they get banished. Also, it can reborn itself, except the turn it was sent to the graveyard. It synergizes pretty well with BFD, because you're going to typically overlay Shen Shen and Krako Dragon or another level 9. Detach Shen Shen during your opponent's turn. Then when it comes back to your turn, you can special summon it again. And when it declares an attack, you can return a banished monster to the owner's graveyard, which is pretty helpful as well for recurring your Nian Nian, for example. One thing to note with this is that this ability applies to both players, so this can actually hurt you if you're not careful. For example, with Zolkin, you need to be able to send 2 level 5 or higher monsters you control with the same level to the graveyard, 1 tuner and 1 non-tuner. So they have to be sent to the graveyard, which means if you have Shen Shen on the field, which prevents them from being sent to the graveyard, you actually cannot summon Zolkin, and then you can't go into Crystal Wing, obviously. And the same applies with Nian Nian and Tutu. If they special summoned by their own effect, then they're banished when they leave the field, so you can't use them to go into Zolkin since they won't be sent to the graveyard. Keep that in mind when you're going through your plays. Break Sword is a solid form of disruption and also a good way to get to Zeus if you need to. M7, this is one that's commonly played in the deck. It can be used both, well, it's pretty versatile in that it can be used to remove your opponent's monsters, but also to recur your own resources, or maybe add back a Maxi or like any other card that you want, or any other monster that you want from your graveyard. So it's pretty versatile. Fan Fan is a good form of removal because it can both banish and banish a card from your opponent's field and your graveyard, which can be pretty devastating depending on the deck that they're playing. Gaia Dragon is used basically as an extra material for Zeus. It can also inflict piercing damage, which can come in handy against certain decks. So you basically, whenever you're going to go to battle phase with one of your rank 6s, you can first overlay for a Gaia Dragon, then you can attack for piercing damage, and then go into Zeus with an extra material. And then of course VFD. So yeah, this deck is fairly difficult to play, I would say. Definitely harder than Out Emancipators, harder than Drytrons as well. However, the skill ceiling is very high on it, so I think winning with it is fairly rewarding, because you're kind of solving a puzzle every time you're playing with the deck. It's also fairly affordable compared to a lot of the other meta decks. And I was able to build it along with Drytrons on like my first 2 days of playing. Yeah, that is all I've got for the deck profile, so next I'll go into some replays from yesterday, which kind of show what the deck can do. So check it out. Our first replay here is going to be going up against Invoke Shaddoll, aka AIDS, Alistair Invoke Dogmatica Shaddoll. So I just call it AIDS because that's what the deck is. So my hand is like not the greatest starting up, but I do have combo here. So I can go into Chuche first, Kirin to send the Qinglong. You generally want to send this first so you can get your combo started by searching Lulu. And I sent Yan Yan as the other card. So we searched Lulu, then we use Lulu to search Gigi, and that triggers Yan Yan's effect once it's summoned. Gigi to recur a virtual world card during the end phase. Go to Kraka Dragon to draw one. It's our first level 9. Then here we just go Chuche, increase the level to 6. Against this Shen Shen. And also one thing to keep in mind is that you wanted to generally keep 2 of your virtual world cards banished, because you need that to activate Chuche to pop a card on the field. So here I'm good. I recur one of my cards with Yan Yan, then BFT, and set called by, and I have Ash in hand. So good luck. Here I just shotgun. Okay, so this is what I was going to talk about earlier. The reason I'm doing this is because it's kind of a meta call. You don't know what you're going to go up against when you go on ladder. So I think calling light is the safest, because if they're playing like Numerons, if they hit you with the Kaiju, you just lose basically. They'll Kaiju you, then they'll do Numeron Network, then just attack you for 8,000. There's really nothing you can do aside from Chuche. But if I didn't have that, I'd be screwed. So I'd like to call light. Also for Eldritch, since that's going around a lot. Golden Lord, if they activate Golden Lord from hand, I target BFD, and then I chain BFD. BFD doesn't negate anything, it just prevents from activations for the rest of the turn. So it doesn't stop an effect that already activated. Which means that Golden Lord will target BFD, BFD will chain, but BFD will still be sent to the graveyard by Golden Lord's effect. So I think it's safest to call light. It does play into cards like Gamma, but I mean, what are you gonna do? There's only so much you can play around. Worst case scenario, I call the Long Attribute, they still can't attack me for the rest of the turn, so I'm still alive regardless. If they go for Schemata, I'm just gonna call by that. He goes for Shaddoll Fusion, that's an easy Ash right there. And he has Called by, unfortunately. So he goes into Shekinaga here, which kind of threatens my VFD next turn. So he has a God Hand here, so he can just go El Shaddoll into window. Here he threatens to bounce my Chuche, so I just pop Shekinaga. This might have been a misplay, because it allows him to recur Spell a Trap, but like, I mean, really, what do I do? He's gonna negate my BFT if I don't do that. He had Spec Shaddoll Fusion. He probably should have added El Shaddoll Fusion, but it's not really going to make a difference here. Here, I'm just going to VFD called Dark. So I know he has a flip monster here. The Shaddolls are flip monsters, and they're dark, so... Having Shen Shen on board is going to be nice, because they get banished as well. So can't activate the beast here. And then Winda can't activate either. Main phase 2 here, I'm going to Lulu again. Then go for Chuche, have that back. And then since I attacked with, or since it exceeds monster battle this turn, I can just go for Zeus as a last resort. Just in case. I do still have an Ash in hand, so I'm still feeling pretty confident about this. Use that on Shaddoll Fusion. And then he's very skilled, so he uses Alistair. He top decks Alistair. Normal summons it. Okay. Goes into Agoides. To pop a Zeus, that's fine. I'm not going to chain Zeus there, that would be a bad idea. Goes into Gravity Control, I mean. He doesn't really have a chance here, so. Yeah. Easy clap. This next one is the mirror match, and I am going second, unfortunately. I have a great hand for going first, but I am going second. It's a good hand for going second, too. So he goes for Lulu here. I'm going to ask the Lulu. I don't want him to get access to Chuche. So what I'm thinking here is, if he sets up VFD, I have Droplet, which is fine, as long as he doesn't have Chuche. Because if he has Chuche, I have to discard a trap, and I don't have one. I'm unlikely to draw one. Otherwise, he can just chain Chuche and pop the VFD, like I mentioned before, and then it'll still resolve. So I want to stop him from getting to Chuche. Goes for Karen, that's fine. As long as he doesn't hard draw it or Kaldun, then I'm good. Goes for the Croc to draw. And he goes for Zulkin, so he's going for a Crystal Wing plus DFD, which is a decent backup plan if you don't get access to Chuche. Increases to level 6, so he can go for Shen Shen and then overlay for VFD. So VFD plus Crystal Wing. Luckily he doesn't draw into his other Chuche, otherwise I would have just lost. Okay, I draw Kowloon, which is a pretty interesting draw here. Because the thing with Kowloon is it would allow me to negate his Crystal Wing. So here I take a little bit of a risk here by sending, well it's not really, I mean, I go Droplet before he uses his VFD. So I don't want to discard another card. Here he uses VFD to get his Shen Shen in the graveyard so that he can bring it back next turn. That's the correct play. So I'm trying to get to a VFD of my own and to clear his board, obviously. I need to draw, so go for the Croc again. Whoa, I just realized they're like making the same pose. Crystal Wing and Croc. That's cool. Okay, so I increase the level of Lulu and then go for Shen Shen. And then I reborn my Lily here because I want to be able to beat over, because Croco Dragon is it was only at 1500, so it wouldn't be able to beat over any of these. I need to keep it on board, so I'm gonna go to battle phase here and beat over both of them so they get banished. and lost. Then I can go for VFT in main phase 2. Here I'm just going to call win during his draw phase, because once he gets to the main phase I don't want him to bring back his Shen Shen. Chains E-Telly, doesn't really matter. He negates me with Qinglong, but that doesn't do anything because it already resolved, and like I said, it's a lingering effect. So now I can just bring back Shen Shen. And attack for game. So that was a pretty good mirror match there. And for the final replay, we have versus Tri-Brigade. And I'm going second. Fortunately, I don't have any hand traps. So I just gotta watch him go off here. So he goes for Bear Brum, so he's going to search Revolt. He uses Bear Brum's other effect, which I rarely see. But he goes for Double Dragon Lord, and then Appaloosa. And then Bear Brum allows him to search Revolt, and to put one back. So I know his set is Revolt, he has 3 monster negates, and DDL. It's going to be tough to play through, so I'm going to go for E-Telly here. There's no reason for him to bounce here because it's too risky. I can just summon him back. He doesn't know what I'm doing yet. But I go for Coral Dragon here just to get these in the graveyard. I don't care if he bounces Coral Dragon. So now I have Qinglong. And he's forced to use Revolt here because otherwise I'm going to negate Appaloosa's effect. So now Sharig resolves banishing the Qinglong, but unfortunately for my opponent, I have another one. So now I can just negate Appaloosa's effects. Lulu resolves, luckily. He doesn't have another interruption. Going to Croc to draw again. I like drawing cards. Oh, okay, so here's an important interaction to know. So when you are banishing, when you summon Croco Dragon by using Yan Yan as one of the materials while it was a tuner, it gets banished, so both of these effects will trigger simultaneously. And you can choose the chain link order. This is important because if there's something you want to draw off of Yan Yan in particular that you have banished, then you want to have it as chain link 2. So you can shuffle back, like say you have Maxi banished off of Desires. You can shuffle that back, and then on Chainlink 1 resolves, and you draw one, you have a higher chance of drawing Maxi, basically, since you shuffled it back. But here, there's nothing, none of these, I don't want to draw any of them, so I have Croco as Chainlink 2 to reduce the chance that I draw into one of those. Oh, yeah. Then I draw GG, which is nice. Pretty much one of the best draws I could have gotten. Now I get Shen Shen. And here again, I'm going to go to battle phase now, because I want this stuff to get banished, and I want to get rid of his Appaloosa. I'm sorry, I need to get rid of his DDL. His Appaloosa is fine. But yeah, BFT. BFT are going to call Wind here. Just to prevent like a Neural effect. Doesn't really matter because he can't activate anything on the field. He tried his normal summon Rescue Cat. It got changed to Wind, so he can't activate. appreciate it. And yeah, that's FTK. So yeah, this deck is pretty solid, even going second against a board full of interruptions. That is all for today's deck profile. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. You can follow me on Master Duel here at my ID, which is shown on screen. And also join my Discord. The link will be in the description. Been getting a lot of subscribers, which is awesome. So thank you. And peace.